Well, look, first of all, we have to put this in its perspective. Russia is a nation at war. This is a war that has cost Russia dearly, and many of the casualties that have come about in this conflict are because of the ability of the Ukrainians to precisely target Russian positions with weaponry provided by NATO using intelligence data provided by NATO in near real time fashion. Um, the United States has been using a number of intelligence collection platforms, including satellites, aircraft, and drones. And the United States has been flying the Reaper drone, MQ-8, off the coast of Ukraine, off the coast of Crimea, um, ostensibly in international airspace. But the purpose of the flights are purely intelligence collection, but not of the standard Cold War variant. This is intelligence collection where the data is being sent to the Ukrainians to be used to kill Russians. And the Russians know this. And so Russia has, on occasion, created special military zones off the coast of Ukraine, off the coast of Crimea, when things are taking place of a certain sensitivity that they don't want the U.S. to be able to readily collect. And the United States has taken umbrage of this, especially. And if you recall, there was before this conflict occurred. Do you remember when the British took their destroyer and ran it up and down the Crimea coast, saying, "It ain't really yours; it's Ukraine's," and the Russians were like, "No, it's ours." But one of the things the Russians did is create a military exercise where they projected a special military zone outside of the territorial boundaries, and the British position was, well, you don't really occupy Crimea, so you're not allowed to do this. And so they challenged it. And then the Russians said, if you ever sail a ship through that again, we'll sink it. The British never went back. Well, the same thing's happening with the airspace. Our position is that Russia has no right to establish a special military boundary, in Ukraine, off of Ukrainian airspace. That Crimea belongs to Ukraine, not Russia. Therefore, whatever Russia does is illegal. We don't mind it. We're going to send our drone through there. And the Russians are saying the same thing. No, you're not. They didn't shoot it down. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why they may not have shot it down is that apparently, according to some video that's been released, that drone was carrying one of the most sophisticated electronic warfare signal intelligence collection pods in the arsenal of NATO, something that is well above top secret. And the Russians may have recovered it, and they may have reverse engineering it. And if there's crypto on it, they may be reverse engineering a lot. This could be a huge intelligence headache for the United States. And if despite all the language from the State Department, we're going to do this again, and you can't stop us. General Cavoli froze all drone operations in the Black Sea and elsewhere until they do a further evaluation. Because the bottom line is an act of war. Let's just be straight up. What the United States is doing is an act of war. We are an active participant in a military conflict against Russia. We're collecting intelligence that's then being provided to the Ukrainians for the sole purpose of targeting Russians and killing Russians. So, we can cry crocodile tears all we want. But I think the Russians are fed up. They're losing people. There are lives attached to this. This isn't innocent activity. This isn't, well, you didn't want us taking a picture of X, Y, and Z. Too bad. No, this is, we didn't want you collecting this data that then gets turned into your fusion center, turns into a target, and you fire a HIMARS at it and kill Russian soldiers. That's what we don't want to happen. And so the Russians took it down. That's my take. Now, Russia says they never made contact with the aircraft. That may be. I would hesitate to believe that the Russians would commit to something like that without first checking the data, because there's video data that would show if there was contact. But there's other ways of bringing it down. I mean, the United States is saying that they clipped the propellers. My guess is that the Russians we're also saying that that they dumped fuel on it. You know, how do you get an afterburner going? You know the trick. You know how they do that? They spray fuel into the jet. So I think what the Russians were doing is coming in and blasting it with an afterburner, coming to the Su-27 and bam, hitting that propeller with the afterburner to create, you know, instability of flight, and down goes Fraser. And I think that's what happened. I don't think the Russians touched the propeller. I do think the Russians deliberately brought it down. They're just in my mind. The Russians deliberately brought it down because that thing was collecting. And again, we'd have done the same thing. We're stupid. We would have shot it down, because we have to be macho. We have to have an F-22 pilot able to paint a drone on next to his balloon, so he can become the modern ace. And I guess there's a prize if you can get 5 different things. So, you get a balloon, you can get a drone, you can get a kite. Maybe if somebody put a band on a bird that's sensitive, you could shoot down a pigeon and get a pigeon on there. There's, who knows what they can come up with. But, the Russians didn't shoot it down because I think the Russians were looking at it saying, whoa, look what they got on there. Look what they're carrying, boys. They're carrying the Holy Grail. If we can get our hands on that, we can solve a lot of problems. And I was watching the head of the Russian intelligence service smiling like the Cheshire Cat when he was talking about this thing. He was grinning ear to ear because he knew something nobody else knew, I think, which is we got it, and we're having a really good time right now, guys, because we're doing it apart. So it's a huge intelligence failure for the United States. And I think that's what Cavoli is looking at now. Who came up with the genius of taking one of the most sensitive pieces of intelligence collection, technology, and then flying it unprotected in a very aggressive manner next to territory controlled by Russia? The whole idea of not providing this equipment to the Ukrainians was to deny the Russians the ability to gain access to the technology. And we just handed it to them. Dumbest thing in the world, literally the dumbest thing in the world. And, we're paying the price now for our stupidity. Well, this is a game changer of the highest degree. There's a lot there's a lot of things we can call game changing. The fact is, if you change any little thing, you've technically changed the game. This one redefines the game. This is huge. You see, because the entire American approach towards the Middle East has been to create a crescent of confrontation involving Iran to try and destabilize Iran. Some people call it the Shia crescent. I think that came from the king of Jordan initially, where we spoke about Iranian influence that ranges from Lebanon through Syria, through Iraq, down into, Bahrain, the eastern provinces of Saudi Arabia, extends into Afghanistan with the Hazara Shia population, and then into Yemen with the Houthi. And we're saying, oh, look, Iran's got their fingers in all of that. And if you take each one of those, you'll see the Saudis are providing a counter, a regional counter, again, from Lebanon, Syria. How did the Syrian conflict begin? Do people understand that it's not, smart people say, well, there was a drought dating back from 2006, 5 years of drought. Yep, you're onto it, but now what? What's part 2 of the drought? That the Syrian government fumbled with the agricultural sector, and you had a lot of people lose their jobs. And who stepped in to rebuild this broken part of Syrian society? Saudis. And when the Saudis come in and build new villages, they build, because the Muslim society, new mosques. And when they build new mosques, they equip them with Saudi clerics who are Wahhabist. And so these Wahhabist clerics came in there and they began proselytizing against the Syrian government, because that's what the Saudis do. And they've done the same thing in Iraq. They've done the same thing everywhere. Yemen, it's a war right now between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And Iran is involved in all of this because, gosh, I don't know, it's their country. All this is their backyard. It all deals with their. So you have this situation where the United States has literally cooked up a crescent of instability designed to weaken Iran. And it's how we control the Middle East, because from the fear that's generated from that, everything else follows, to include the Abrams Accords, which the Trump administration was able to successfully negotiate, that sought to take the Gulf Arab participation in this crescent of conflicts and enhance it with Israeli participation. And so the Biden administration has been lobbying very hard for Israel to improve its relationship with Saudi Arabia for direct talks. Now, Saudi Arabia has been hesitant, but if someone had asked me before the Chinese intervention which way the trajectory was going, I'd say, well, Saudi Arabia is under a lot of pressure, and they're probably, while they won't have direct relations with normalization of relations, I think you can see improvement in that direction. Boom, in comes China. And what China has done is brought, and there were hints of this. Before the Chinese. Here's the other beautiful thing. I'm all over the map right now, but no one knew this was happening. I mean, the Russians apparently had a clue, but in America claims now afterwards, no, they sort of told us they were doing this. But the average layperson sit back going, what? But there were hints about this. For instance, Saudi Arabia is saying they want to join BRICS after Iran has been accepted BRICS. Now, why would Saudi Arabia want to join the same economic forum with Iran? Why would they do that? What's the reason behind that? Well, the reason is everybody's starting to take a look at the United States, the petrodollar, et cetera, and saying, that's not a team we want to be part of anymore. Saudi Arabia sort of had it up to here with American arrogance and Israeli arrogance. The way the Israelis come in and push their muscle because they're backed by the big American uncle. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. We're Israelis, you got to do what we want to do, and we want a war with Iran. And Saudi Arabia is going, our future, this Project 2030 that we have, requires stability, lots of stability. And what America's offering is instability. Lots of instability. In fact, they're offering things that could terminate our country if Iran was to blow up all of our oil. So it's probably better if we work with the Iranians as part of an overall trans-Eurasian economic union, like China and Russia are talking about, to maximize our leverage on the international oil economy. Again, why would Saudi Arabia want to line up with the United States and Europe, which are on a downward trajectory, and get their oil income locked up into the stupidity of that policy? Or they could join the winning team and say, no, we're going to be part of this big global infrastructure over here where our ability to produce oil, at least we can start to leverage that to our advantage with these people economically. And the Chinese, of course, they need energy. They need energy, and they need stable sources of energy. They don't need a regional conflict to screw that all up. So the Chinese are coming in going, we'd like to buy lots of energy from you. We'd like to buy a lot of energy from them. But if you guys fight each other, we can't buy any energy from anybody. So why don't we all just learn to get along? And they pulled it off. And look at the first thing out of Biden's mouth. Israel, the security of Israel is paramount. Wait a minute, I thought we were talking about peace, but it's not peace, baby. Because Israel doesn't want peace. Israel wants the United States to bully everybody into, keeping Israel viable. And the Saudis, they had there was a Israeli diplomat supposed to travel to say they denied him permission. Said, no, you can't come here. I think he was going there for some sports stuff. They're like, we really don't want an Israeli guy here right now. So this is a huge deal, and this changes everything. For instance, in Lebanon right now, what you have is Hezbollah in conflict with traditional Christian Sunni elements of society that are funded almost exclusively by Saudi Arabia. So now if Iran and Saudi Arabia are talking, there's a chance now that Hezbollah and these other people, because right now the other people, the Christians and the Sunnis, they're all intimidated by the United States and the European Union because of the leverage they can put on Saudi Arabia indirectly. But if Saudi Arabia is saying, nope, we're with the Iranians, now they can sit down, and if the United States says, well, we're going to sanction you, they're going to go, and we don't care. It can bring about a peaceful resolution to Yemen. And if you haven't seen the 9 Yemeni children, then you're not a human being. It can bring an end to that suffering. It can bring stability into Iraq. I mean, this literally has the chance of turning this crescent of chaos into a crescent of cooperation. And suddenly peace will break out all throughout the Middle East, which is the exact opposite of what Lloyd Austin wanted. Lloyd Austin's tour was all about war.